But what exactly was that feeling just now? He lowered his gaze to his own hands and fell silent, replaying the moment again and again in his head. It felt as if the path of the iron fragment was being pulled along a line, almost like I could sense the direction it would fly before it reached me. It followed a trajectory as clear as an arrow in flight. And if that iron fragment came flying toward me again now, I feel like I could avoid it much more easily than before, maybe even without thinking. Could this strange sensation be connected to the training Luna Runcandle gave me? The thought surfaced naturally, and once it did, Jean couldn't ignore it. Before that feeling fades from my memory, I should try it again. With that thought, Jean picked up his sword once more, stood before the sphere, and let his expression grow serious. Then a voice suddenly called out, "Attention! You have been assigned a mission." This time, the announcement came directly from Zed Runcandle. The faces of the Daytona brothers instantly twisted into miserable grimaces, as if they already knew nothing good was coming. The assignment is an event mission. Daytona Runcandle grabbed his head in despair and groaned. Why does it have to be the Beamant Empire? I already feel sick just thinking about it. Daytona Runcandle dropped down as if his legs had given out. I hate event clothes. They're so tight it makes me want to die. Zed Runcandle, standing over them, added dryly, I sympathize. Because of you two, the other siblings don't have to go dance around at the Imperial banquet. His words sounded almost sympathetic, but there was no warmth in them at all. His face then turned extremely stern. But even if it's an event mission, it is still a mission. And you dare complain? Try whining like that one more time, and I'll show you what it really means to want to die. The two brothers immediately shrank back and answered together in miserable voices, We're sorry, Uncle. Jean Runcandle could only break into a cold sweat and think helplessly. Me Runcandle and Runcandle are really going out of their way to punish brothers who aren't suited for this kind of thing. Sending them to a Beamant Empire event mission is unbelievably malicious. Then Zed also explained that because it was such a major event, the Runcandle family had little room to refuse it. Many extremely strong people will be there for entertainment, he said. Go and observe them carefully. See whether you can learn anything useful. The two brothers answered again, Yes, sir. Then the Runcandle elder called out again, Jean. Jean immediately replied, Yes, Uncle. Zed lowered his eyes to the document and read aloud. The mission assigned to you is the assassination of an important figure. The target is one of Talaris Endorma's playthings, the lover of the master of the Ice Palace. One of that woman's lovers. Jean Runcandle listened with a calm face that hardly changed at all, while Daytona Runcandle looked completely stunned by the sheer scale of it. Then the elder asked, You know about the Ice Palace and its master, don't you? Jean replied without hesitation, Yes, Uncle. As for the Ice Palace, it is the giant stronghold rising from the western sea of the continent. And the master of the Ice Palace is the true owner of that frozen domain. The 51st master of the Ice Palace, Talaris Endorma, is known by the title Star Spider of the Abyss. She is infamous for the cruel torture she inflicts on anyone who dares lay a hand on her lovers. The Ice Palace is an independent power beyond the control of both Runcandle and Zipple. So you understand how dangerous both the Ice Palace and its master are, don't you? The weight in the question made it clear that this was no ordinary assignment. The Runcandle elder asked again, then presented a document containing the target's details. The assassination target's name is Alcaro Chinderer. He currently has an Ice Palace bodyguard and is staying in the lawless region. May Moth. As Jean Runcandle closed his eyes and thought over the information, the two brothers beside him turned pale and blurted out in shock, What? May Moth. Then the two of them panicked and whispered urgently to each other. Daytona Runcandle muttered, If he has to go all the way to May Moth, this is basically a Guardian Knight's mission. Daytona Runcandle added under his breath, Jean has talent, sure, but isn't this way too much? Even so, Jean himself calmly raised his voice and said, Uncle, I have a question. The one who issued this mission is the Chinderer family, correct? Then does that mean the Chinderer family wants one of its own descendants dead? Hearing that, Zed Runcandle answered firmly, That's right. It seems the Chinderer family has already tried every possible way to bring him back, and all of those attempts failed. At this point, They likely believe it's better to kill him than allow family secrets to leak out. So, the elder asked, fixing Jean with a hard stare, "Do you believe you can carry out this mission?" When that question came, Jean answered with a cold, unwavering expression. "I will do it." Seeing that firm resolve and the complete lack of hesitation in the boy's eyes, even the Runcandle elder could not help but feel surprised. Even then, as he watched Jean Runcandle stay so calm and composed, he could not help admiring him in silence. Does this guy seriously not know what the Ice Castle and the Mammoth region are like? He wondered. Then why did he agree so quickly without even hesitating? He had even been thinking that, if Jean resisted, he might have to call the knights in to force the matter. After a brief moment of thought, the elder of the Runcandle clan chose not to say anything further. He simply let out a low breath and muttered, Never mind. Being decisive is a good thing." He continued in a firm, measured voice. "The three of you will depart in a few days." The two brothers were still clearly uneasy, and they stammered as they looked at Jean. "You Uncle Jean, are you really going to Mammoth?" He answered as though the matter were already settled. If Jean wanted to go, then there was no reason to stop him. Afternoon training would be canceled until the mission was complete, and even personal training would be restricted so it would not interfere with the operation. The two brothers had no choice but to answer together, "Yes." Jean also replied in a flat, almost perfunctory tone, "All right, uncle." At that exact moment, one of them suddenly turned and called out, "Hey, Jean, little uncle." Jean looked back, clearly puzzled, and asked, "What is it?" He stumbled over his words for a second. It's. Then, all at once, he blurted it out with nervous urgency. "If it becomes necessary, say that you're a member of the Runcandle family." Daytona quickly joined in from the side. "Yeah, no one would dare to lay a hand on you." Seeing the two of them this flustered and awkward, Jean could only feel a little helpless. "What is this?" he said. "Are you actually worried about me?" The second they heard that, both of them denied it in a rush. "No, we're not worried about you at all." That's right. One of them repeated stubbornly. "I'll deal with you later, so don't die before then." Jean ignored the bluff completely. He simply turned, resting his hand on his sword as he began to walk away, and said, "Brothers, by the time I get back, change your minds." As he finished speaking, Jean casually drew his blade and slashed coldly at the sphere nearby, his movement sharp and effortless. The two brothers could only tremble and cling to each other after that. Their eyes were wide with fear as they stared at Daytona, too shaken to even pretend they were fine. After delivering the slash, Jean turned back once more and flashed them a bright, almost playful smile, as if he had not just terrified them half to death. "Do you like my sisters, or do you like me better?" he asked so suddenly that it made the moment even stranger. Then, before anyone could answer properly, the elder of the Runcandle family called out sharply, "Hey, Daytona, hey Tona." Startled, the two of them immediately straightened and bowed together. "Yes," they answered in unison. Watching Jin's back as he walked away, the elder spoke in a low, meaningful voice. Like the little one said, "Get yourselves together. Don't provoke him until you're strong enough to handle it. If you want to live a long life," he added, fixing the two of them with a look heavy with warning. The reminder lingered in the air. Before long, the day had passed, and a group of people had gathered together. "Young master, you're really going to the lawless region of Mammoth?" one of them asked, still sounding unable to believe it. Jean answered immediately, "Yes." Then Misha looked at him more carefully and asked again, "But, young master, your hair color." Jin's hair had changed now, enough that even people close to him would notice the difference at a glance. He calmly explained the reason. "I'll be going in disguise. I can't let anyone recognize me as a Runcandle." His tone was light, but the logic behind it was perfectly clear. "I understand," Misha replied, though her expression still carried worry. Then she added in a brighter voice, trying to sound cheerful, "My mission is different from yours, so I'll be using a different teleportation gate. I still have to go through all the immigration procedures on your side." "Your mission is suppression, right?" Jean asked. Mesa immediately nodded and answered without hesitation. "Yes." Then Jean glanced around at all of them and suddenly asked, "Why does everyone look so down? What's wrong?" Mesa and the others were all wearing gloomy, uneasy expressions, and none of them seemed able to hide it. She quickly denied it. "It's nothing. We just wanted to say goodbye properly." Even as she said it, the sadness in her face made it obvious that it was more than that. Jean felt they were making things a little too heavy, so he joked to break the mood. "What's with this farewell atmosphere? It sounds like you're all acting as if this is the last time we'll ever see each other." Then, with a shrug, he added, "Well, if luck turns bad, I guess some of us really could die. But worrying about it now won't change anything, will it?" He continued in a steadier voice. "So instead of drowning in that, let's focus on the task in front of us." "I'll definitely come back," Jean said with quiet confidence. "So don't worry too much." Boris forced a smile and answered, "Yes, young master. Please be careful." Jean gave his shoulder a reassuring pat and said, "Yeah, I'll see you later." A little later, Julia let out a soft exclamation. "How lovely." Jean glanced back at her and answered with a faint grin, "Isn't it?" There was warmth in the exchange, brief but real. "Please protect them," she said earnestly. Murakin, in his black dragon form, immediately cut in with confidence. "Don't worry. I'm the master." But before he could finish showing off, Jean interrupted him without missing a beat. "Just don't get caught, and don't stand out too much," Jean said bluntly. The black dragon ground his teeth in annoyance. "Unbelievable, this brat. You're the one who should be careful not to get exposed. And don't get too confident just because you're wearing a disguise. I'm leaving." A short while later, Jean had already brought his horse outside and was ready to depart. Julia glanced off in one direction and said, "Sir Murakin isn't here, so it's going to feel very quiet." Jean answered right away, "Think of it as a peaceful break. Julia, I'll bring you back a souvenir." She immediately clasped her hands together sincerely, her face full of worry despite trying to stay composed. "Still, the mission is to assassinate the lover of the master of the ice castle. I'm honestly very worried. I know you're not just some ordinary intermediate cadet anymore, young master, but Mammoth is still an incredibly dangerous place." As he swung himself up onto the horse, Daytona spoke one last time. "Please be careful on your journey." Jean nodded and answered with a radiant smile, "All right, I'll come back." With that firm promise, he finally set off. The scene then shifts to the lawless region of Mammoth, a filthy and brutal gathering place where the worst sort of criminals drift together like rotting debris in a storm. At that moment, a huge, broad-shouldered man carrying a heavy weapon shoved the door open and bellowed into the room. "Hey, you bastards. I'm back. Why isn't anyone answering?" Someone inside immediately shot back. "What? Who is it?" "Tonk, is that you running for your life again?" The man called Tonk swaggered into the drinking area and proudly replied, "That's right. I'm back," he declared, spreading his arms like he owned the place. Back to the sanctuary of undisciplined criminals. He sounded absurdly proud of it, as if surviving another chase by terrifying people was some great accomplishment. Then, almost at the same time, the mood inside shifted. The group of criminals all turned toward the door together, as though they had just sensed something unusual approaching. "Huh." Jean appeared in the doorway with cold, razor-sharp eyes and an expression fierce enough to make the whole room feel like it had frozen over. He looked so dangerous that it was as if not even grass could grow in the wake of his presence. The people inside immediately reacted in surprise. "Huh? A newcomer," one of them muttered, and the room buzzed with sudden curiosity. Jean paid them no attention at all. He flicked a coin through the air toward the counter and said, "Cold water and a simple dish." At once, murmurs began to rise around him. "Look at this guy." The owner said nothing, but he neatly caught the coin with an almost cheerful motion, clearly amused rather than offended by the newcomer's attitude. By then, Jean had already taken a seat at a table as if he belonged there. Soon after, a man named Denton walked over, patted him on the shoulder, and sneered. "A newcomer with a big mouth, huh? Who do you think you are?" "I'm a former 9th-level knight turned traitor." Seeing that Jean had no intention of answering, the man leaned in closer, glared at him, and bared his teeth in a threatening grin. "Hey, newcomer, if you're new here, shouldn't you learn the rules first? Now kneel quietly and lick my toes." Before the last word had even fully left his mouth, a sharp dagger was suddenly pressed under his chin. In the same instant, a heavy spray of blood burst across the table, shocking everyone nearby. Without even waiting for the man's body to finish collapsing, Gene slammed his palm down on the table, rose to his feet, and demanded in a cold, angry voice, "How much longer are you people planning to make me wait?" At those words, the faces around him filled with clear panic and disbelief. The room had gone from mocking amusement to tense shock in an instant. Then the silence shattered into loud commotion. "Uh-huh. He's dead," someone shouted. "He's really dead. I knew this day would come." Instead of fear, the whole crowd erupted in wild cheers, raising their beer mugs high as if they were celebrating a festival. Seeing that reaction, Gene could only bite his lip and frown inwardly. Just like my master said, he thought, this place is packed with genuine lunatics. In Mammoth, if you wanted to be recognized by criminals like these, you had to prove your skill and your nerve first. Then he picked up the broken sword fragment and held it out in front of him, his gaze steady, as if the object itself carried a deeper meaning. He spoke again, though this time it sounded more like words meant for himself than for anyone else. "He helped me so much, both in this life and in the last. I just hope that one day I can repay him. Master." A little later, a glass of water and a plate with a simple piece of cake were carefully brought out and set in front of him. The servant lowered his voice and said cautiously, "I didn't poison it." Gene looked at him and replied without even blinking, "Poison is forbidden here. At the very least, I know that much." Hearing Gene say that, the man's interest in him deepened. "You're young, but you know quite a lot. Do you have family here or something?" Gene Runcandle set a gold coin on the table and answered in a flat voice, "That's none of your business." The owner immediately snatched up the coin, his attitude turning sharp and practical as he got straight to the point. So what is it you want?" "Opium. I've got some good stuff. My old man's stock has been selling like hotcakes lately. Or are you looking for someone instead?" he asked between bites, sounding far too casual for the kind of city this was. Gene ignored the rest and asked only one thing. "Is there anyone here named History?" At those words, the image of a young woman with long, flowing red hair rose clearly in Gene Runcandle's mind, vivid enough to feel almost real. Her presence lingered in his thoughts for a moment, like a clue he could not afford to overlook. The owner closed his eyes for a brief moment, then slowly shook his head as if he were certain. "No, I'm sure of it," he said without hesitation. There was no sign that he was hiding anything, only the blunt confidence of a man used to dealing in dangerous information. "I see." Gene Runcandle replied at once, not wasting time dwelling on the answer. "In that case, can you recommend a decent place to stay for the night?" His tone stayed calm and casual, but his eyes remained alert, already thinking ahead to his next move. "Preferably somewhere that isn't crawling with bugs," he added dryly. The owner gave him an immediate answer, as if the place had already come to mind. "There's one that'll suit you. An inn called the Moonwell, on the west side of the city. It's clean enough, and more importantly, it's the kind of place where people know when to keep their mouths shut. That's where the King of Mid stays," the owner went on, lowering his voice just a little. "So there's no reason for the kind of trouble that happened before." Sometime later, as evening settled heavily over the western district of Mid, Gene Runcandle arrived at the Moonwell. The inn stood quiet on the outside, but the stillness only made it feel more suspicious. Gene Runcandle was there as well, silently organizing his thoughts. And Alcaro Chinderer, he's just the worthless son of a count, a spoiled fool raised inside a glass cage, someone who has never known a single real hardship in his life. The more Gene thought about him, the colder his expression became. He came here chasing pleasure and amusement, nothing more, Gene Runcandle thought with disgust. There's nothing to him except the bloodline written on his face. A coward who grovels before the strong and tramples the weak without a second thought. And the reason Alcaro Chinderer had entered such a dangerous city was obvious. He wanted to catch the eye of the mysterious castle master, who was said to be distracted these days by a new lover. "So this is the inn where he's staying," Gene Runcandle concluded as he observed the place. The man from earlier had mentioned a newly opened opium den in Mammoth, and that made the picture even clearer. He's probably upstairs right now, locked in his room and stuffing himself with drugs. Since Alcaro Chinderer was one of the mysterious castle master's lovers, there was no way he would be left unguarded. He had to have bodyguards close by. By then, Gene Runcandle had already begun climbing the stairs inside the inn, moving without drawing attention. First, I need to understand exactly what's happening in that room, he thought, keeping his steps light and measured. By that time, Jean Runcandle had already reached the inside of the residence area. From one of the rooms came the sound of someone grinding their teeth and shouting in furious frustration. Why? Why are you saying you can't do it? The voice was shrill with desperation, ugly and unstable. Yesterday, when you brought it to me, there wasn't any problem at all, the voice snapped from inside. Jean Runcandle stopped where he was and looked toward the scene, his lips curling slightly as realization struck him. Today really must be my lucky day, he thought. Who would have guessed I'd run into him this quickly and this cleanly? One of the bodyguards answered in a firm, restrained tone. We can't let you continue like this. But Alcaro Chinderer was far too deep in his craving to listen. His face twisted with resentment as he spat back. Damn it, come on, I'm begging you. I can't last even an hour without it. His voice had dropped from arrogance to pathetic dependence in an instant. Faced with that frantic, aggressive behavior, the guard could only respond with tired helplessness. No means no. His patience was clearly wearing thin, but he still forced himself to stay formal. Young master, remember this as well. Our duty is to protect you, not to feed your addiction or indulge every filthy whim you have. But Alcaro Chinderer only pointed a trembling finger at him, eyes opened wide in rage and humiliation. Shut up, he screamed. I don't want to hear another word out of you. His pride was still there, but now it was mixed with the desperate ugliness of withdrawal. Stop talking. If you don't give me that stuff right now, I've got my own ways, you bastards, Alcaro Chinderer yelled, half mad with fury. I'll remember every one of your faces. The second my love comes back, you're all dead. One of the guards let out a weary sigh, and Alcaro immediately seized on it like an insult. What? How dare you sigh in front of me like that? The guard ignored the outburst completely. Instead of answering, he only turned his head and exchanged a look with another guard nearby, the kind of silent glance shared by men who had already endured far too much. You damn barefoot poor bastards. Alcaro Chinderer kept cursing, but before he could finish, one of them slammed a fist into his chest. The blow cut his words short, and his face twisted violently with pain as he staggered back, choking on his own breath. Damn it, one bodyguard muttered under his breath, glaring at the addict with open contempt now that his patience had finally cracked. How much longer are we supposed to protect this useless punching bag? At this point, I almost wish he'd just die from an overdose and ended himself. The bodyguards were clearly sick to death of dealing with this addict, their irritation spilling out in bitter complaints. Why is that lowly thing being kept alive in the first place? One of them muttered. The other immediately cut him off in a colder voice. Silence. Our job is to do exactly as we're ordered. Acting on personal feelings is unacceptable, no matter how disgusting the target is. Jean Runcandle watched them head farther up the stairs and began quietly analyzing the situation. Those bodyguards are at least 6th-level swordsmen, he judged. Killing Alcaro Chinderer himself would be as easy as breathing. The real problem is everything that happens after that. His gaze sharpened. I need a way to lure him out, kill him cleanly, and still escape those guards safely. And poison is out of the question, Jean Runcandle continued to think. In mid, using poison was treated as a serious taboo. If he assassinated Alcaro Chinderer that way, the entire city would turn against him in an instant. But with those bodyguards in the way, killing the man directly was no simple matter either. So how do I secretly kill Alcaro Chinderer right here inside the Moonwell? Jin's face hardened as he worked through each possibility. Then, all of a sudden, Jean Runcandle slapped his hand down hard, a look of decision flashing across his face. All right, he muttered to himself, his resolve settling in at once. I've decided. A clear spark of excitement lit up his face. It was not reckless excitement, but the sharp thrill of someone who had just found a dangerous answer to a difficult problem. Sometime later, the dark sky had already begun to brighten. From outside, a voice suddenly rang out. How many bodyguards does that guy have? The tone was crisp and direct, belonging to someone used to being obeyed immediately. The person following behind answered without delay. 6 people, my lady. There was no uncertainty in the reply. They had clearly already investigated the matter carefully before coming. After hearing that, the young lady neatly folded the document in her hand and spoke with a bright, almost playful cheerfulness that clashed strangely with the topic. Honestly, because of one bastard who doesn't know his place, everyone has had to work so hard. What a nuisance. Her smile was light, but there was killing intent under it. The two people with her answered in the same cheerful tone, as though this were merely routine. But today puts an end to that, doesn't it? Since my lady has come personally, things will be much easier for all of us. Their confidence in her was absolute. Well, that's true, the young lady replied right away. A man like him can be killed whenever we want. You said he's staying at the Moonwell, correct? Good. Then let's hurry. Good news should arrive early, shouldn't it? The two attendants bowed their heads and answered together, Yes, my lady. The scene then shifted elsewhere. At that very moment, the sky above was tearing open with violent flashes of lightning, the air trembling as if the heavens themselves were preparing to split apart. Then the flickering lightning began to gather into one place, drawing together with terrifying force. In the next instant, it struck downward through the air. The ground below shook violently from the impact, and the people nearby staggered in confusion, struggling to keep their footing as the shock ran through the area. The two followers immediately spoke up over the chaos. My lady, that's the direction of the private room. Their voices were tense now, the earlier cheer completely gone in the face of the sudden attack. The young lady, thrown off balance by the force of it, could not help cursing aloud. What the hell is this? Looks like we picked the worst possible day. Even as she fought to steady herself, she clicked her tongue in irritation, clearly furious that the situation had become more complicated. The scene shifted back to Jean Runcandle. At that moment, he slammed his hand onto the table with force, the sound sharp inside the room. His eyes were fixed and steady, as if every part of the plan had finally locked into place. All right, I've made my decision, he said again, this time with even greater certainty. When he looked up, his expression was filled with fierce determination, the kind that left no room for hesitation. After that, Jean Runcandle had gone upstairs and begun calculating every step in detail. I'll unleash terror with the golden moonlight magic from inside my room, he thought. If I pour in enough soul power, I can create destructive force on the level of the sixth form. The idea was outrageous, but his confidence in it was real. That spell will make everyone believe the caster is a 6-star mage, Jean Runcandle reasoned. And who would ever suspect a 15-year-old kid of being a 6-star mage? No one. Not even Boraz and Zion, who only just reached that level themselves. Thanks to the unique traits of soul power, there would be no clear trace linking the spell back to him, and suspicion would naturally drift elsewhere. After deciding that, Jean removed his contacts and altered his appearance slightly so the whole thing would look like an attack launched from outside. Among all the spells he could use, summoning lightning was probably the most suitable choice. It was loud, dramatic, destructive, and perfect for creating panic while hiding the truth behind the attack. At that moment, a dark black aura began to spread beneath Jean Runcandle's feet. It appeared silently, like a shadow blooming over the floor, but the pressure coming from it was anything but quiet. As he released his spiritual power, the black aura rose and churned upward with growing intensity. It twisted like smoke and living darkness together, thick with unstable force, as though something dangerous was taking shape around him. Some time later, Jean Runcandle was completely wrapped within that deep black shadow. His figure was barely visible inside it now, and the atmosphere in the room had turned heavy and ominous, making the entire place feel suffocating. At the same time, lightning began to gather in his hand as well, crackling with bright, violent energy. Watching the spell take form, Jean Runcandle could not help thinking with a grim edge of satisfaction. I've really come up with a terrible plan this time. His state grew slightly frenzied as the power swelled. The lightning spreading from his hand became wider and fiercer by the second, snapping through the air with a savage sound that made the room feel too small to contain it. Bit by bit, that lightning drew together into a huge, overwhelming current of power. It no longer looked like a simple spell. It had become a roaring stream of destruction, bright enough to stain the room white with its glow. Within that raging flow of lightning, Jean Runcandle's face appeared for a brief moment, lit by the storm he himself had created. The sight made him look almost unreal, like a mad young mage standing at the center of his own disaster. Summon lightning. That was the spell Jean Runcandle had chosen. Down below, the young ladies' group endured the violent pressure of the attack, shielding themselves as the blast and thunder rolled over the inn with merciless force. Far from panicking, the young lady looked excited. "What? So we really did choose the wrong day," she said with a sharp grin instead of fear. This young woman was Ceres Indorma, captain of the 7 swords of the secret palace and daughter of the castle master herself. Even in the middle of chaos, her presence remained striking. Meanwhile, the power of Jean Runcandle's lightning only continued to grow stronger and stronger. Each surge carried more weight than the last, until it felt less like magic and more like a storm determined to crush everything in its path. The lightning poured down so heavily that it became almost impossible to see clearly. For a moment, everything was swallowed by flashing white light, roaring thunder, and a curtain of destructive energy. Someone standing behind them, still trying to make sense of what was happening, spoke in a tense voice. "It looks like someone at the Moonwell has managed to anger a high-level mage." The conclusion sounded crude, but under the circumstances, it was the most natural thing anyone there could believe. Ceres Indorma reacted at once, her expression tightening as she quickly agreed with the grim possibility. "It does look that way," she said, but her sharp eyes did not stop moving. Still, this could just as easily be an attack aimed at the secret palace itself. Then she suddenly turned back toward the inn, her voice growing urgent. Inside were 6 of her own people, not to mention her mother's lover, and Alcaro Chinderer was there as well. The moment that thought settled in her mind, Ceres Indorma broke into a run and barked out her order without hesitation. "Let's go. I don't care what happens to that Alcaro bastard. My people come first." The 2 attendants immediately followed after her at full speed and answered in unison, "As you command, my lady." As Ceres Indorma ran, she caught sight of a river of lightning still flashing in the distance beneath the dark, swollen clouds. It was not normal lightning. It moved with intention, fierce and unnatural, flickering across the sky like a warning from something much more dangerous. A second later, another bolt came crashing down, and the house ahead exploded in a deafening blast. Wood, stone, and dust flew high into the air as if the building had been ripped apart from within. The people buried in the wreckage stumbled out through the rubble, coughing and staggering, and one of them immediately cursed. "Damn it! What kind of lunatic trash did this? Hey, bastard!" Another one shouted in panic and anger, pointing wildly. "You were bragging before that you killed the Zeph image, weren't you? What if this is revenge for that?" The fear in his voice made his accusation sound even more desperate. "I knew it. I knew something like this would come back on us." The 2 attendants instantly rushed forward, trying to move through the chaos as fast as they could. "Damn it," one of them shouted. Behind them, Ceres Indorma's composure cracked for the first time, and she called out in alarm, "Wait. Hold on, both of you." But at that exact moment, a violent flash of light burst out in front of them, cutting across their way and blocking their path. The sudden wall of light forced everyone to stop in place, the air itself seeming to shake with danger. For a brief second, no one could move forward without risking being torn apart. Then an even larger bolt of lightning formed overhead, brighter and thicker than the last. It split the dark sky open with terrifying force, gathering enough power to make everyone below instinctively freeze. It came crashing down and exploded across the ground below, triggering another violent blast that tore through the area. The 2 attendants stood in front of the scene, their faces drained of color, and could not stop themselves from crying out in panic as the destruction spread before their eyes. "What is going on?" Ceres Indorma muttered, genuinely bewildered now. Even she, bold as she was, could feel the weight of that last impact. The shockwave alone was enough to tell her how powerful it had been. That must have been the final strike," one of the 2 said, still staring at the smoking devastation in disbelief. The subordinate quickly nodded in agreement. "Yes, my lady." At that moment, Ceres Indorma looked toward the enormous, smoking heap of collapsed rubble and quietly prayed under her breath. "Please let everyone still be alive." It was a rare, unguarded thought, but the fear behind it was real. Just then, from the broken remains of a fallen wall, a hand slowly rose and gripped the stone. The movement was weak, dusty, and strained, but it was enough to show that someone had survived beneath the wreckage. Elsewhere among the rubble, Jean Runcandle was struggling just as hard to crawl out of the destruction he himself had caused. His whole body ached, and every breath felt rough in his chest. That final lightning strike must have mixed in nearly all of my spiritual power, he thought grimly. It almost reached the 7-star threshold. I only avoided a fatal injury because of the pendant. Even for him, the outcome had been dangerously close. It looks like the secret palace guards are all still alive, Jean Runcandle observed as he checked the scene through half-lidded eyes. But where is Alcaro Chinderer? His mind sharpened despite the pain. If that fool is still alive, then this may become an even better opportunity for me. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. Ceres Endorma had stepped close and bent down to look at Jean Runcandle directly. "So there are people around my age in Mammoth too?" she asked, sounding oddly casual despite the ruined inn around them. Then her expression softened just a little. "Are you okay? Looks like you got caught in the attack as well." Jean Runcandle lifted his head in a dazed, startled way, as if he had only just realized someone was standing over him. His face was clouded with dust and confusion, making him look like nothing more than an unlucky young bystander dragged into a disaster he did not understand. Without even waiting for an answer, Ceres Endorma turned away and spoke briskly. "Come on, let's get out of here first. Stand up if you can." At the same time, the two attendants approached and reported, "My lady, our people are over there. They're injured, but they're still alive." Hearing that, Ceres immediately brightened and said with obvious relief, "That's good, really good. Gather everyone outside." Ceres Endorma ordered at once, her tone turning firm again. "And if they're still protecting Alcaro Chinderer, tell them to finish him off." The attendant bowed without hesitation and answered, "As you command, my lady." There was no surprise in his voice, as if Alcaro's death was the most natural conclusion imaginable. Then Ceres Endorma added one more instruction, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the damage around them. "Those attacks are too similar. They have to be the work of the same person. If you find the one responsible, tie him up immediately." The two attendants answered again in perfect sync, "As you command, my lady." Jean Runcandle stayed still, pretending to remain stunned while quietly analyzing Ceres Endorma. From the way they were talking, she must be the daughter of the secret palace master, he thought. So she came here personally to deal with Alcaro Chinderer. That alone told him how low the man's standing truly was, even among those connected to power. "His death has basically already been decided," Jean Runcandle concluded. "There's no reason for me to check on his condition anymore. The real problem now is the aftermath." His thoughts moved quickly. "If that woman remembers my face, it could become troublesome later. I need to disguise myself as much as possible and slip away while the whole place is still in chaos." As he thought that, he deliberately ruffled his hair, smeared himself more carelessly, and lowered his head to make himself less memorable. Then, right at that moment, one of the guards came forward and announced, "My apologies, my lady. Alcaro died in the raid. We failed to carry out our escort duty." His voice was respectful, but there was no real grief in it, only formality. After hearing that, Ceres Endorma responded with shocking indifference. "Really? Then that's good news," she said as casually as if someone had just cleared away a small inconvenience. "I came here to relieve you of that duty anyway. Watching over that idiot for so long must have been exhausting." Her words were aimed at Alcaro Chinderer's guards, and the only answer they could manage was a stiff, uncomfortable, "My lady." Then, with an energetic spring in her step, Ceres Endorma rose lightly onto her toes and drew her sword before everyone present. Holding the blade high where all could see it, she declared in a loud, commanding voice, "The secret palace will be taking temporary control of this inn. I am Ceres Endorma, daughter of Talaris Endorma, master of the secret palace, and captain of the 7 swords of the secret palace," she announced proudly. "Anyone who objects will be treated as an enemy of the secret palace." Her words were sharp, open, and unapologetically arrogant, and it was no surprise that many of the people listening reacted with immediate displeasure. A wave of disbelief spread through the crowd almost at once, and fingers were raised in protest. "Don't make me laugh," someone shouted. "Even if you are the daughter of the secret palace master, this is mid." The mood turned ugly in an instant, as people pushed back against her authority instead of bowing to it. The secret palace dares to step over the kings of the city and take control of the situation on its own. Another voice snapped. You're overstepping your place. And for all we know, the reason this place got attacked in the first place is because of the secret palace. The accusations were reckless, but fear and anger had already stripped the crowd of caution. Those sharp rebuttals made Ceres and Dorma purse her lips and fall silent for a brief moment. She did not answer right away. She simply stared at them with a hard, unreadable look, and that quiet was somehow more threatening than if she had shouted back. Then, in the next instant, her sword flashed once in a cold, clean arc. It was so fast that some of them did not even understand what had happened until the blade had already passed through their necks. The strike was decisive, merciless, and terrifyingly casual. Holding the steaming, blood-wet sword in her hand, Ceres Indorma spoke without the slightest tremble. I already made it clear. Anyone who objects becomes an enemy of the secret palace. Her gaze swept over the survivors like a blade of its own. The king of Mammoth? Do you really think that cheap little game of pretending to be emperor in this nest of thieves gives you the right to look down on the secret palace? If this attack truly was aimed at the secret palace, then we will compensate you appropriately, she continued, each word crisp and cold. But if the target of that mage was one of you, and the secret palace was only dragged into your mess by accident, then what exactly are you planning to do about that? The question left no room for a brave reply. The people who remained could only clench their teeth and swallow their fury. None of them liked being threatened into silence, but none of them wanted to die where they stood either. Ceres and Dorma turned back toward them with an icy expression, making sure they all understood that the matter was already decided. I think this is more than fair, someone finally muttered bitterly. Fine. Occupy the inn if you want. We're all stuck in the same mess now anyway. Another person grudgingly added. More importantly, we need to find the mage who caused this attack and kill him before he strikes again. The resistance had not vanished, but fear had finally pushed it into submission. For now, we search the survivors, Ceres and Dorma said. The mage is not one of my people. There are no mages among the secret palace members here. Her eyes moved across the crowd with open suspicion. So the most likely answer is simple. One of you thieves probably provoked the real culprit while stirring up trouble somewhere, and now everyone else is paying for it. So stop this pointless resistance. There was no warmth in her voice at all now. She had no patience left for complaints, only for results. And you? At that point, Ceres and Dorma's hand came to rest on the fallen wall beside Jean Runcandle. She looked down at him with a half-annoyed stare. Why are you still so slow? Didn't I tell you to get out? By then, Jean had already smeared extra dirt over his face to hide himself better. Looking foolish on purpose, he gave a clumsy little laugh and stammered, "WL. I'm a bit scared. And my left leg's hurt, too." "I'm sorry," he added, keeping up the pitiful act. Seeing that snake-like, overly meek appearance of his, Ceres and Dorma pulled out a small vial and remarked with a bright laugh. "Ahaha, you're ridiculously cowardly for a man, but you're kind of a cute little swordsman, I guess. Here, pull up your pants." Her tone stayed teasing and casual, as though she were talking to some harmless stray she had picked up off the road rather than a stranger caught in a magical disaster. "You're lucky, too," Ceres and Dorma went on with open amusement. "Not only did you survive all that, but now you get the great Ceres herself applying medicine to your wound." She said it with shameless pride, clearly enjoying the chance to show off even in the middle of wreckage and smoke. "Feel honored." Without a second thought, Ceres and Dorma sat down right there and began applying medicine to Jean Runcandle's injury herself. Jean watched her carefully while maintaining his timid mask, then asked in an innocent voice, "Then what am I supposed to do to repay a favor like this?" She looked up at him with a sly smile curling at the corner of her mouth and replied, "That won't be necessary. How could someone like you ever repay the great Ceres?" She sounded completely entertained by the idea. "Just think of this as a beautiful memory, and every now and then, bow in the direction of the secret palace." "Done," Ceres and Dorma said lightly as she stood back up. She turned as if to leave, but even then she did not forget to throw a small, playful wave over her shoulder. "Goodbye." It was oddly cheerful for someone who had just seized an inn and cut down dissenters without blinking. "Goodbye," Jean Runcandle replied as well, his face still smudged with dirt. He waved back with the same harmless-looking smile, keeping up the act until the very last possible second. But the moment Ceres and Dorma and the others were fully out of sight, Jean Runcandle lowered his hand at once. The warmth vanished from his expression, and his face returned to its usual cold, controlled calm as though the timid boy from a moment ago had never existed. Mission complete, Jean Runcandle thought quietly. Then the scene shifted to another place entirely. At that very moment, a separate battle was already underway, the air there filled with the sound of steel, impact, and violence. A knight stood in the middle of the fight, now driving his blade through a monstrous creature with practiced force. His movements were clean and powerful, showing the calm skill of someone used to surviving brutal encounters. The monster, racked with pain, threw its mouth open wide and let out a horrible cry. Its body twisted in agony, and the sound it made was rough enough to shake the nerves of anyone nearby. Then the giant corpse finally gave way and crashed down to the ground. The sheer size of it made the fall look almost unreal, as though a piece of the earth itself had been dropped from above. It hit with a heavy thud that sent a visible shock through the ground. The impact was anything but small. Then a voice rang out, carrying over the aftermath of the fight. "The night's done. If things keep going like this, I think all of us will actually make it home alive." Stepping up onto the monster's corpse, the speaker said it cheerfully, with the rough relief of someone who had just survived another deadly battle. The two boys slapped their hands together in an excited high five. Their faces lit up with the kind of relief that only came after surviving a real fight. "Let's make it home together," one of them said with a fierce grin. "And when we do, we'll stomp all over the pride of those bastards who laughed at us before." Their voices were full of raw energy, half excitement and half stubborn pride. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through their moment of celebration. "Dante Hyran, Scut, don't get careless. There are still 7 monsters left." Mesa Milcano warned them with a serious expression, her tone leaving no room for sloppiness. The two boys straightened at once and answered without complaint, "Got it, Mesa." The Orcus usually moved in small groups, which made them annoying to deal with under normal circumstances. But now that they were wandering around alone, picking them off had become far easier than expected. That unnatural change in behavior made the hunt smoother, even if it also felt faintly suspicious. "Maybe the gods are actually on our side today," Mesa Milcano thought as she frowned and kept calculating the situation. Or maybe young Master Jean Runcandle really is under some kind of divine protection, and that good fortune is spilling over onto everyone around him. It was not the kind of thought she would normally entertain, but the strange ease of this mission was difficult to ignore. Then she pushed those thoughts aside and continued assigning tasks in a calm, practical voice. "For now, keep searching and move quickly. Don't relax just because things have gone smoothly so far. Stay alert until the very end." Her words were steady, and that steadiness helped keep the group focused. "Be careful," she added once more. Right then, a rustling noise came from the nearby bushes, subtle at first, but sharp enough to draw attention. A second later, the black head of Murakin, currently in his cat form, slowly poked out from the leaves. He glanced at them, then turned away and started walking off with an almost offended, dejected look. "So they think there are still 7 left," he grumbled inwardly. "Seriously, if they just catch that many more, then I get to go home too." Even in that small body, his irritation practically rolled off him. A few days earlier, when Jean Runcandle's squad had first received their mission, there had been a strange sight in the forest. A group of Orcus had been gathering together in one place, restless and noisy, when suddenly, a voice rang out over them. "Is everyone here? Listen carefully, you Orca bastards. From today onward, every single one of you moves alone." The order was so blunt and overbearing that even the monsters seemed caught off guard by it. Standing there was the Black Dragon, his presence so fierce that it made the whole scene feel colder. His face looked downright terrifying as he delivered the warning. "If any of you dare disobey me and gather in groups of 2 or more, I'll personally send every last one of you on your way." It was not an empty threat. Even the air around him seemed to agree. Remember that. If you understand, then get moving. After hearing him, the other Orcus had no choice but to scatter in miserable silence, each one shambling off on its own. None of them looked happy about it. but none of them dared challenge him either. Back in the present, Murakin was still walking around by himself, muttering under his breath with endless dissatisfaction. That little brat always finds a way to make me do the most annoying jobs. His tail flicked with irritation, and the complaint sounded like it had already been repeated several times. What's even the point of a 1,000-year agreement? Murakin grumbled bitterly to himself. Seriously, what's the point? The older the promise sounded, the more ridiculous it clearly felt to him in moments like this. Then, all at once, a loud shout echoed through the area, startling the birds resting nearby and sending them flying into the air in a panic. The quiet atmosphere shattered instantly, and Murakin's attention sharpened at once. The center of the universe, my foot, he muttered a moment later. Now hiding on a tree branch, Murakin peered down at Jean Runcandle's squad below while thinking to himself, when I get back, I'm making that brat buy me a brand new mana stone for this. His sulking was genuine, but so was the care hidden underneath it. In this body, there's only so much I can do, he thought as he lay flat on his stomach along the branch and let out a long sigh. Still, beneath all the complaints was a quiet wish to see the mission end cleanly. At the very least, let this finish without anyone dying. Suddenly, at that exact moment, a heavy footstep struck the ground with enough force to send a solid tremor through the area. The vibration was deep and unnatural, not the kind of thing an ordinary beast could produce. Murakin instantly dropped all his lazy irritation and became fully alert. His body tensed in one smooth motion, and his eyes sharpened as the playful mood vanished completely. Whatever had just arrived was not something to ignore. A dark aura began to radiate from him as he spread out his senses and carefully scanned the surroundings. What is this energy? He thought, every instinct on edge now. The feeling coming toward him was strange, ancient, and deeply unpleasant. It's coming this way, Murakin realized. In the hazy smoke ahead, an enormous shadow slowly took shape, broad and towering, with a presence that felt anything but ordinary. Even before seeing it clearly, he could tell this was not going to be easy to deal with. By then, Murakin had already shifted back into his human form, staying silent as he continued to observe. Damn it, he muttered under his breath. Where did something like that come from? His eyes narrowed. And I seriously doubt it's just going to turn around and leave on its own. Luckily, it only feels around 3-star in terms of raw force, Murakin judged, though he did not relax. If Jean Runcandle were here alone, this would still be dangerous enough to matter. As he spoke, a stream of power began gathering in his hand, dense and dark. He held that power ready as though preparing to strike at any second. That brat will notice my barrier immediately anyway, he said to himself. His tone was gruff, but there was clear confidence behind it. If Jean Runcandle sensed it, he would understand something serious was happening nearby. At that point, Murakin flicked his hand and sent the condensed stream of power downward below. The motion looked effortless, but the force behind it was anything but light. A current of black air descended from above, growing stronger and heavier with each passing second. It did not simply fall, it spread and deepened, swallowing the space it passed through like a living shadow. The impact of that descending power was so intense that it distorted the area and formed a dark, sealed space around it. The surroundings dimmed unnaturally, as if the world itself had been boxed in by a curtain of black force. Below, Belop Schmitz, who had been sitting down for a short rest, also felt immediately that something was wrong. A chill ran through him before he even understood why, and his body reacted before his mind caught up. He looked up at the sky and frowned in confusion. It suddenly looks darker than before, he muttered. Is it about to rain or something? The words were casual, but the uneasy feeling in his chest kept growing. Outside the sealed darkness, the figure kept drawing closer and closer, and now its outline could finally be made out more clearly. It was carrying a massive rake-like weapon, and each step it took made the atmosphere feel heavier. Then one red eye flared to life in the gloom. At the same moment, Murakin's grim voice rang out, and the majestic image of the original black dragon appeared as he demanded, "How dare you all?" The question thundered through the space with overwhelming authority. He hovered in the air, enormous and imposing, facing the newly appeared giant creature head-on. In that form, Murakin looked nothing like the sulking cat from before. He was every bit the dragon king his presence promised. Then he spoke again, his voice colder and more dangerous than before. Moving forces around in my territory without my permission? The displeasure in his tone was unmistakable, and the pressure behind those words hit as hard as a physical blow. But then Muraken's expression shifted slightly as realization struck him. Ah, so that's it. Not a living creature. His eyes narrowed further. An ancient relic. That explained the wrongness of the aura. It had never felt alive to begin with. The giant tomb guardian standing before him was a headless stone statue, yet it was fully armed and still moved with dreadful purpose. Even without a head, it gave off the eerie impression of being watchful, like a weapon animated by some forgotten will. Muraken stared at it and analyzed the situation with unusual seriousness. I'm sure Dragonkind wiped these things out thousands of years ago, he said, more to himself than anyone else. The sight of one standing here now was so wrong that even he sounded disturbed by it. And on top of that, why are the giant guardians of the dead gods here? Muraken muttered, clearly unsettled. Then his expression hardened again. Whatever the reason, this is not exactly a reunion I'm happy about. There was no humor left in him now. He opened his mouth and spat out a black sphere wrapped in a dark aura. The object hung in the air for a moment, pulsing with compressed force, like a tiny star made of pure destruction. I'll finish this in one breath, Muraken declared. As soon as he spoke, the black sphere released a violent stream of power. That current twisted downward in a spiral and slammed straight toward the giant below with ruthless precision. The giant's single eye flashed brightly, and it released a cry that was impossible to describe with any normal word. It was not the voice of flesh, not the scream of a beast, but something ancient and broken that scraped at the mind just hearing it. The entire space shook so violently under the collision that it became impossible to tell what was happening inside the storm of force. Sound, dust, and pressure swallowed everything together until the battlefield was reduced to pure chaos. Then, within that hazy darkness, a sharp flash of light tore across the space. It was sudden and blinding, like a blade of brightness cutting open a sealed world. For a while, everything seemed to spin and blur together before the scene slowly began to settle and clear. The dust drifted, the echoes faded, and the outlines of what remained finally became visible again. A moment later, only Muraken and a handful of broken objects floating in the air were left behind. The giant guardian itself was gone, reduced to ruin so complete that it barely seemed real. After confirming that the threat had been erased, Muraken slowly descended and landed on the ground. Even his landing carried a heavy, controlled force, though he no longer looked quite as effortless as before. Then, with a shift of form, Muraken transformed back into his human appearance. The immense dragon vanished, leaving behind the familiar figure that was easier to overlook, though the dangerous aura still lingered around him. As he rolled and stretched his arm muscles, Muraken let out a rough breath and clicked his tongue. "Who? Is it because I haven't used my strength like that in so long?" he muttered, sounding more irritated than proud of himself. "My whole body aches," he complained openly. Then his expression darkened again. And there's no way a tomb guardian would just show up here by accident. That conclusion came to him almost immediately, and he clearly did not like it. No matter how many times I think about it, this has to be connected to the Zippel clan, Muraken said grimly. The more he turned the situation over in his head, the less room there seemed to be for any other answer. What the hell is happening to this world? He muttered, staring into the distance with narrowed eyes. Then he made up his mind. I'd better keep this from the kid for now. If something unexpected happens, I'll deal with it myself and protect him before it reaches that point. If that kid keeps growing at this pace for another 10 years, Muraken thought, his expression turning strangely serious, then he'll be able to stand and fight the Zippel clan head-on. The idea was bold, but coming from him, it did not sound impossible at all. The image of Dian Shingon surfaced in Muraken's mind for a brief, uneasy moment, like a memory tugged up from somewhere dark and old. Then the scene shifted once again, moving away to another place entirely, a room where several people were already gathered in tense silence. At that moment, the door suddenly opened, and someone hurried inside without even trying to hide his urgency. The air in the room tightened at once. as if everyone could already tell the news he carried was not going to be good. It was a chubby man with round glasses, breathing fast from how quickly he had rushed over. The instant he stepped in, he blurted out, Sir Bishkul, there's trouble. My masterpiece, the Tomb Guardian. This man was Buber Gaston, the shape-shifting sorcerer. Bishkul Ibriano, leader of the Kinzello Revolutionary Council, closed the door behind him and answered in a low, steady voice, I've already heard. The children were attacked in the middle of the night by a Tomb Guardian, Bishkul Ibriano said, his expression hard and unreadable. The words were calm, but the gravity behind them made the room feel even heavier than before. That's right, Buber Gaston gasped, grabbing his head in obvious distress. What kind of monster would do something that horrible? Who would destroy my masterpiece like that? He looked genuinely twisted up over it, half furious and half heartbroken. Bishkul stepped closer and said in a measured tone, Buber, that part isn't what matters most right now. The one who defeated that giant was a dragon. Bishkul Ibriano continued, his eyes narrowing slightly. And not just any dragon, a shadow dragon. I went to inspect the scene myself. That last detail made it clear he was not speaking from rumor or guesswork. Hearing that, Buber Gaston's face twisted into a confused, almost panicked expression. A dragon? He repeated. You're saying the dragons have noticed what we're doing? His voice had dropped from outrage to alarm in an instant. I'm not certain yet, Bishkul Ibriano replied coldly. But for now, I think this was a warning. He paused, thinking several steps ahead already. Keep a close eye on everything around you. I'll send some useful people to assist you. Then his face hardened even further as he made up his mind. And we need to arrange a meeting with the Zippel clan soon. The scene shifted back again, this time to Elder Jonan. He stood there with his hands on his hips, laughing with open pride and satisfaction. Good. Every one of you completed the mission safely and made it back to mid without a problem. The people who assigned this mission to you must be red-faced by now. They're probably grinding their teeth over it already. Standing below, Jean Runcandle answered respectfully. Thank you, Uncle. His tone was calm, but there was a quiet firmness in it, the kind that came from knowing he had truly earned the praise. All right, the Runcandle elder said as he looked over the group, his voice carrying naturally across the area. Entire unit, at ease below. The cadets responded together without delay, their voices rising in disciplined unison. Yes, sir. A little later, once Jean Runcandle had fully rejoined the squad, the others crowded around him with obvious relief and excitement. Young master, it's such a relief that you're safe, one of them said. Jean answered with a light, cheerful smile. Yes, everyone really did well. You all handled yourselves properly out there. Off to one side, Mel stood watching the scene and eventually spoke up. Did you all hear about it? I don't know how it happened, but on that exact same day, a mage launched a terrorist attack on the very guest house where the assassination target was staying. The cadet beside him immediately clicked his tongue in envy. Damn, young Master Jean really is absurdly lucky. Mel could not help agreeing. This world is seriously unfair.